From the research bench to the patient's bedside, this is Bench to Bedside with your host, Vice Chancellor and Director of the University of Kansas Cancer Center, Dr. Roy Jensen.
Tobacco use is a major contributor to the three leading causes of death among African Americans: heart disease, stroke, and cancer. More than 39,000 African Americans die from tobacco-related cancers each year. What's more, even though African Americans usually smoke fewer cigarettes and start smoking cigarettes at an older age, they are more likely to die from smoking-related diseases than whites. The issues surrounding these disparities are complex. Our team of researchers is one of the only groups in the country exclusively focused on improving tobacco use treatment outcomes in African American smokers with the goal of reducing tobacco-related disparities. Good morning. I'm Dr. Roy Jensen, Vice Chancellor and Director of the University of Kansas Cancer Center. And joining me this morning is Dr. Nikki Nolan, co-director of the Cancer Center's Cancer Prevention and Control Research Program, and Mrs. Tricia Snow, project director at the Kick It Swope initiative. And also joining us is Ms. LaWanda Swoops, a former smoker who participated in the Kick It Swope program. So let's start with you, LaWanda. You used to smoke, but today you are tobacco free. Congratulations, first of all. Could you tell us your story?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for having me. I guess my story is a little bit unusual. I was born and raised in the South, which is a big tobacco, South Carolina, Georgia. And so I was always exposed to tobacco. Grandmother smoked a corn pipe, chewing tobacco, that sort of thing. So I was around cigarettes, and I didn't really start learning to smoke until I got to college, where you learn how to do a lot of things, and then wound up having to unlearn them. So I started smoking in college, which was about 35 years ago. Had been a smoker off and on. And I guess my reasons for wanting to quit changed as I got older. I started smoking mainly because I thought it was cute, and it was a thing to do. And then I started smoking to control my weight. I realized that if I wasn't smoking, that I was eating. So then it became a vanity thing. And then I did stop smoking for about 2 years after I had my son, and then started smoking again. So it's kind of been this journey, wanting to stop smoking, but couldn't. But until I found this program at Swope, that's when I really wanted to take it seriously and realize that I had support.
Well, thank you so much for giving us that story this morning. So, Dr. Nolan, what are some of the factors that are contributing to disparities in tobacco use and tobacco-related cancers?
Sure. So historically, racial and ethnic minority communities have been less likely to be offered advice or assistance to quit. Decades-long histories of mistreatment and bias have led to mistrust of the medical community. In clinical trials, however, where access to and use of treatments are equal, we find that social determinants of health primarily account for poor treatment outcomes among African American smokers, specifically things like unstable housing, unemployment, lack of income, and living in neighborhoods characterized by violence, over-policing, and neighborhood incivilities, increased levels of stress, and make it harder for African Americans to quit. Finally, I think it's important to note that racial and ethnic minority communities have been explicitly targeted by the tobacco industry, and what that means is that they live in neighborhoods with more tobacco outlets and more access to tobacco products, primarily menthol cigarettes, for African Americans.
Mm-hmm. So, Tricia, how is African American tobacco use different compared to whites and other groups?
Sure. There's a number of notable differences between the tobacco use patterns of African Americans and those of whites and other racial and ethnic minorities. Dr. Nolan just mentioned a number of them, and one of the primary ones is that African Americans are much more likely to smoke menthol cigarettes. They are 80%, over 80% of African Americans smoke menthol cigarettes compared to less than 30% of white smokers. This high rate of menthol use is a direct result of targeted tobacco industry tactics. Menthol cigarettes are higher in tar and nicotine, and they're much harder to quit smoking. So there's a number of factors there. Also, the cooling sensation of menthol cigarettes allows smokers to inhale much more deeply into their lungs. And this is the primary reason that African Americans take in as much as 30% more nicotine and carcinogens with every cigarette that they smoke. Also, African Americans metabolize nicotine more slowly than other racial and ethnic minorities. And this is one of the primary reasons that the nicotine stays in their system longer. And so African Americans tend to be lighter smokers, smoking 10 or fewer cigarettes per day, or being non-daily smokers, smoking on some but maybe not all days of the week. So given all of these differences in their tobacco use patterns, then it is extremely important that we conduct research studies that are designed specifically to meet the needs of the African American smoker.
So I don't think anybody really appreciated all the complexities that you just outlined there. It's not just a straightforward issue. So when it comes to quitting tobacco, it's obviously not just a one-size-fits-all approach. And Tricia, the Kick It at Swope project has literally treated thousands of African American participants over the last 2 decades. In your program, I would venture is really unlike almost any other program in the United States. Could you tell us how you really address all of these issues in trying to get African Americans to smoke or to stop smoking? So.
Sure. There is not time for all of that, but the Kick It at Swope program is completely one of a kind. While there's a lot of other quit smoking research programs in the U.S., the Kick It at Swope series is one of the largest and longest running programs that are designed specifically to reduce the disparities in smoking cessation efforts for African Americans. So the Kick It at Swope project uses tobacco dependence counseling and medication to help smokers kick the habit. The counseling is by certified tobacco treatment specialist and is really individualized and tailored so that we meet each person where they are in their journey to quit. Now, the Kick It at Swope project has had experienced such long-term success because of the invaluable partnership between the KU Cancer Center and Swope Health Services. The Swope community has really given us the trust and helped to make this process possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, LaWanda, could you tell us a little bit about how Kick It at Swope helped you?
Well, I'm going to tell you, Kick It at Swope, I don't know probably what I would have done without them. They provided the structure that I needed in order to quit. And they also gave me the encouragement that I needed. I came to Kick It at Swope on a referral process. A coworker of mine, actually, she was one of my smoke buddies, and we would go out and smoke together. And I said, "Girl," I said, "you want to go out and get a cigarette?" She was like, "I'm on Kick It at Swope." I said, "What?" And so she referred me, and I knew that if she could do it, I could do it too. So I made a date. I went down there, and they did not make me feel bad for being a smoker. I think that was the big thing. And then they gave me a plan. I had a plan of action, the date I was going to quit smoking, why I want to quit smoking, the money I would save for quitting smoking. I think now, eventually I want to be a grandma one day, and I want to be able to see my grandbabies. And I want to be healthy doing that. I think Swope also gave me the knowledge that I needed to be able to do other things other than smoking. So the plan was, other than get up and have a cigarette, get up and work out, or get up and have a full breakfast. So they gave me a plan I didn't feel like I was out there floating on my own. So, yes, they gave me a plan and they held me accountable, with the different tests they do to make sure that your oxygen is where it should be. So yeah, it was the best thing for me. And I don't have the desire, to smoke after all.
That's a fantastic story. So Dr. Nolan, we'll turn back to you. Your research on menthol cigarette use in the African American population played a vital role in the FDA's decision to propose a menthol ban, and all of us at the KU Cancer Center are extraordinarily proud of that research, and it could literally save hundreds of thousands of people, over the next few decades. Could you tell us a little bit about that research and how you determined that menthol is not just a passive flavor, and it actually has an active role in contributing to the addiction?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So our research has consistently shown that menthol cigarettes are more addictive and harder to quit. So across now 3 clinical trials, we have found that non-menthol smokers, so African American non-menthol smokers, have a 2 times higher odds of quitting than menthol smokers. And that is true regardless of the treatment provided. So meaning that whether we provide African American menthol smokers with varenicline, bupropion, or any of the nicotine replacement therapies, the menthol smokers have 2 times reduced odds of quitting smoking.
Wow.
And that research, combined with research from others across the country, has really influenced the FDA's decision to propose a ban on menthol flavoring in cigarettes.
So Tricia, we've just heard about the fact that menthol cigarettes could be more addictive than regular cigarettes. Could you tell us a little bit more about why we think that is?
Why menthol cigarettes are more addictive than
Yes.
others? Sure. Well, menthol is added to cigarettes to give them a fresher and a cooler taste. The menthol makes it easier for smokers to inhale deep down into their lungs, where the smoke can do even more damage. Menthol increases how the body absorbs nicotine and other cancer-causing chemicals from cigarettes. And as we just discussed, African Americans are a lot more likely to smoke menthol cigarettes. And this is one of the primary reasons why African Americans tend to have a harder time quitting smoking and have higher rates of lung cancer compared to whites.
Mm-hmm. So if you're just joining us, we're here with Dr. Nikki Nolan, Tricia Snow, and LaWanda Swoops talking about tobacco disparities in African Americans. We know quitting tobacco is a struggle for so many people, and you may have a number of questions. And luckily, Alexis Del Cid is here to take your questions, and you can share them in the comment section, and we'll be answering them live throughout the broadcast. Alexis, do we have any questions so
We
far?
do, Dr. Jensen, and keep the questions coming. You can also DM us or text us, and use the hashtag #BenchToBedside if you're posting on our Facebook page, and share this link with anyone you think could benefit from this discussion. I have a question that I think everyone on this panel could address in one way or another. This is from Andrew. Andrew wants to know, is there any evidence of a better outcome if the doctor is also African American? And Andrew wants to know, why don't we have more Black specialists here in Kansas City? Anyone want to tackle that?
Sure, I'll start there. Well, one of the sad realities of the last 20 years is that we don't have any more African American males applying to medical school now than what we did 20 years ago. We have increased the number of African American women that are applying to medical school, but it's just extraordinarily unfortunate that we have such a disparity in terms of matching the diversity of our workforce versus the diversity of the patients that come in our doors. And I think, frankly, this is going to be an issue that is critical for healthcare moving forward. We're becoming a more diverse, nation all the time, and we simply have to find a way to enable there to be a great deal more representation within the medical community from all communities that we see in the United States.
Has your research found, and this is another thing I think Andrew was asking, has your research or your studies found that if the doctor and the patient have that in common, that there's a better outcome, a better result?
You want me to take
Why
that?
don't you take that?
Okay. I mean, I think that it really comes down to trust and rapport, and the extent to which there is that sense of trust and rapport between the patient and the provider. Many times you do find that you're more likely to trust someone who looks like you, but that's not always the case. So we refer to it as human factors, and it's these human factors that really matter when it comes to quitting smoking. But I do think that, we've made a concerted effort to have a diverse team at SWOPE. And it's also, key to our partnership with SWOPE Health Central, which is a federally qualified health center on the Missouri side that serves a predominantly African-American community, and their providers are more diverse.
LaWanda, it looks like you've got a comment just about ready to bust out of you there. So
Well,
why don't you go ahead?
I was just going to say that I agree with that. I think people are a lot more, at least people that come in to SWOPE, they feel a lot more comfortable when they have a provider that does look like them. I mean, I think we've seen that, over the last couple of years, people being able to feel like they can trust a doctor or a provider with their health care. At the time, when I came to SWOPE to do the program, my provider didn't look like me, but I was okay with that. I was perfectly okay with that. I think there was a comfort level with that particular provider. And then I also felt like he cared, like he really supported me in my effort to stop smoking.
Well, thanks for that. So, Dr. Nolan, the FDA's decision to ban menthol cigarettes, and it's not done yet, obviously, represents literally decades of work. And as I said, we're so proud that you and your team have been big contributors to that. What would a potential menthol ban mean to you personally?
So a menthol ban on cigarettes would be a win against the tobacco industry, and it's also a very important step. I would say one of the most important steps in the last many decades in closing the gap in tobacco-related disease and death experienced by racial and ethnic minority communities. There are other countries, Canada has kind of led the charge in this, that have been successful in imposing a ban on menthol cigarettes. And we know from the work in Canada, that following a ban on menthol cigarettes, menthol smokers are more likely to give up combustible cigarettes. They're more likely to make quit attempts, and many are successful.
So, LaWanda, I can't believe I failed to ask this, but did you smoke menthol cigarettes?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay,
yes, sir, I did.
So
And
tell
I'm
us
gonna
about
tell
what the menthol ban
Yeah.
means to you. Yeah.
Sure. I think the menthol ban is a perfect start. The menthols, as Dr. Nolan said earlier, they make it easier to smoke, so to speak. They were a lot more, refreshing, I suppose. But they made it a lot easier to smoke. And when I did not have a menthol, or I was bumming a cigarette off of somebody that didn't have menthol, I didn't want to smoke because it did not give me that cool, relaxing, chilled type feeling. And so if this is going to make it less attractive for people to smoke, and then I'm all for it. Absolutely.
All right. So I'm curious why you think that menthol cigarettes are not nearly as popular among other racial and ethnic groups. Is there any explanation for that? Or?
I mean, really, it comes down to targeted tobacco industry marketing. So menthol cigarettes have been almost exclusively marketed to African American communities. and not so much to other communities of color. And that is primarily the reason why we see such higher rates of menthol cigarette use among the African American community.
So obviously eliminating disparities is a huge priority for us in the Cancer Center. And in fact, it's in the next set of guidelines, it's going to be a critical factor that we have to address from the National Cancer Institute. From your standpoint, why do you think it's important to address disparities in our catchment area? What would you say about that?
Sure. So our catchment area is very large. It includes all of Kansas and then 18 counties in western Missouri. And that's a very heterogeneous population, but it includes a large portion of rural individuals and then a large number of Hispanic, African American, and Native American individuals. And so it's important for us to meet the needs of these unique communities. I think that addressing disparities in the catchment area is a social justice issue. Everyone deserves equal access to high-quality, evidence-based cancer care. Prevention, that includes prevention and treatment to reduce cancer disparities. And the community and outreach and engagement arm of the Cancer Center is key. And what that means is working for and with the community. So many of these communities, they know they know what's important to them, and they know what they need to get it done, but they may lack the resources to make that happen. And that is our role as a cancer center in helping provide the resources to those communities, listening to what they need, and then helping, making sure that relationship is bidirectional, meaning our initiatives are informed by the community, not imposed on the community. And I just think that's so important.
Right. So just a bit of background for our audience. The community outreach and engagement guidelines for our Cancer Center are a fairly recent development, and I think they're a fantastic addition to the guidelines for NCI-designated cancer centers. As Dr. Nolan pointed out, we have to demonstrate and document that we do reach out to our communities. We are inclusive. We need to make sure that we not only understand cancer issues and disparities issues within our region, but we have to show that we're actively doing something about it. And frankly, I can't think of a better example than the Kick and Swope project to demonstrate that. So it sounds like we have another question.
We do. We're getting a few different questions on the marketing angle that Dr. Nolan, you were talking about. A couple different questions here is Denise wants to know what that looks like. Basically, when you say marketed more to African Americans, does that mean more posters, more menthol cigarettes placed up front? And then Megan wants to know, can the government regulate how menthol cigarettes are regulated to African Americans, and why hasn't the government done that? We have seen things in Chicago, I believe, the push to not allow singles to be sold or malt liquor in certain neighborhoods because it was being marketed heavily to those neighborhoods. Can any of you speak to that?
I can take a stab first.
Yeah.
So if you go into a African American community, you will find more tobacco outlets. So more convenience stores and just tobacco shops that sell tobacco products relative to more affluent or white neighborhoods. Also, when you go into these stores, you will see more posters, more cigarette marketing in the form of posters, and then also marketing at the point of sale. And almost all of that marketing is related to menthol cigarettes. That's the first part of the question. Remind me of the second part.
The other question is, can the government do anything to remove that? It doesn't seem fair. that you don't see those posters in other neighborhoods, but you'll see them in certain communities and tons of them.
The government can, but they have chosen not to regulate menthol cigarettes. And I mean, they removed, flavoring was removed from all cigarettes a decade or two ago, except for menthol. And so, but April 21st of this year, the government finally made the decision to move forward with banning menthol cigarettes. That will take many years to happen. But so the government has had the authority, they just haven't asserted the authority. They finally are doing so.
But has not taken any move to cut down on the marketing to specific African American communities. There's been no move from the government to do that.
No, I mean, you'll see moves from municipalities, so certain cities and, you know, other areas have taken more stringent guidelines on marketing. But in terms of a federal approach, no.
LaWanda, thanks to the thousands of volunteers who have worked with this Kick It at Swope project. We have really learned and continue to learn, I think, better ways to help a large variety of people to quit tobacco. Why should someone consider participating in a research study like what's being held at Kick It to Swope?
Well, I think, normally people look at research being on such a large scale. But I think to participate is just kind of doing your part. That's how I felt in choosing to participate. Just doing my part to maybe help someone else. I know they're giving me the opportunity to refer someone, and just doing my part, just my little part in the community to help someone stop smoking.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point out that, 20, 25 years ago, there wasn't a lot of evidence to suggest that smoking behaviors were different among different communities. And, we haven't talked about it today, but one of the great things about our population health department is that we have investigators that are tailoring messages and focusing messages on different communities. We have a whole group working with the African American community, the Hispanic community, Native Americans, rural Americans, and it's not a one size fits all, and if you try to approach it with a one size fits all approach, you're not going to be very successful in a lot of different venues. Do we have any more questions, Alexis?
This one's COVID related, but also related to menthol cigarettes. Chantal wants to know, are menthol cigarettes related to higher cases of COVID in African American communities? It's an interesting question. We know smoking is related to COVID, right? It puts you more vulnerable.
So I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. I mean, we certainly know that smoking puts you at increased risk for more severe COVID than being a non-smoker. But I don't know that anyone's really looked at the link with menthol cigarettes. So that's a great question that I don't have the answer to.
Bob has a research question. I think this is for Dr. Jensen. He wants to know if there's any research being done or that has been done about things that could be put into cigarettes to make them less addictive. So could you do that?
Well, I'll turn that question around, and there's been great research done on what you can take out of cigarettes to make them less addictive, and that is, you can take out the nicotine. Mm-hmm. And when you lower nicotine, you definitely lower the addictive power. Nicotine is one of the most addictive drugs known to mankind. It's right up there with cocaine, with heroin. I don't care what drug you want to name. Nicotine, plays at that level, and frankly. It's been the addictive level of nicotine has been what has sustained the tobacco industry for literally hundreds of years. It is a drug which has enormous health consequences, and you just look back at history and all of the health consequences to populations all over the world. It's stunning. I mean, the data would suggest that in the 21st century, there will be 1 billion Chinese die of lung cancer.
1 billion?
1 billion.
Wow.
So if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will.
Wow. These are some great questions that we're getting from our viewers. Is there anything that they haven't asked you that you wanted to address on this panel? A specific issue that really gets you?
Yeah. I think obviously I'm pretty passionate about this, but the power of the tobacco industry and their ability to influence and regulate our government. We should be regulating them, as Bernie Sanders said the other day, and I'm on another topic. The tobacco industry regulates our government more so than we regulate them, and it has stunning health consequences. And I know myself, having worked against them in our own state legislature, they are a powerful force of flat out evil, and they'll do anything they can to get people addicted to cigarettes and continue their business model. So,
boy, that's a shame. Yeah.
Well, we're approaching the end of today's show, and we know it is so hard to quit smoking. What tips do you have for people who are interested in quitting? And we'll start with Tricia. What would be your suggestions?
It's more than a suggestion. I would say overall, get help. It is hard to do on your own. You need support. Research suggests that the combination of tobacco dependence counseling and medication is best, hands down. Smokers who combine these methods have a 50% greater likelihood of quitting successfully compared to going cold turkey. So much. And there's a number of free resources that are available, like the State Quit Line, which is 1-800-QUIT-NOW. The State Quit Line offers personalized support and resources to help you quit. NIH and CDC also have some free apps that they've developed. Those are great. If you combine one of these things with one of the 7 FDA-approved quit smoking medications, then you're really on the right path. So there's a lot of great things you can do there to help you quit smoking. These medications are also now a covered benefit and can be provided at low or no cost if you have health insurance or Medicaid. But overall, if you are trying to quit smoking, then it's a journey. If you haven't succeeded yet, then don't quit trying. You have to learn from each attempt and make another attempt, and it will be more successful. It will.
Great information. Dr. Nolan.
Well, I'm going to steal one of the things that LaWanda has shared with us about her story, and that's enlist the support of family and friends. So smokers tend to reside in households and have other family and friends who smoke. And if you can change the norm and quit together, you're more likely to be successful.
Yeah. And LaWanda, any final thoughts from you?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to want to quit. I thought it was going to be really difficult for me. As a matter of fact, I had pretty much given up on myself. And then I decided that, it was time. And so just being introduced to a program that you feel comfortable with and the people surrounding you and giving you support, I think is ideal. Look at things that you want to do later in life. Look at the people around you. I mean, people around me all the time said, when are you going to stop smoking? Are you're still puffing on those cancer sticks, and just trying to shame me into smoking. But I think certain programs that kind of embrace you and just kind of walk you along and kind of hold your hand, making sure that you have, you stick to your medication. I stuck to my pack. If one fell off, I put another one back on. And so I think that mentally I started to realize that, hey, I may be able to do this. I went from smoking maybe 6 or 7 cigarettes a day down to 3, and then maybe down to 1 or none at all. So yeah, just find a program that you're comfortable with, that people that support you. Get your mind ready because it is a journey, and stick to it.
That's great advice. Alexis, sounds like we have some more questions.
Bonnie had a question. I was actually wondering this too for LaWanda, about triggers. Bonnie wants to know if you had any triggers that you had to eliminate from your routine. Like, for example, there are people who associate like a cup of coffee with their cigarette.
Yes.
What about you?
I think for me, I was usually around other people that smoke. So, being around people that didn't smoke was good for me. Also, just maybe having a cocktail with friends, happy hour, leaving my friends to go out to have a cigarette that didn't smoke. So yeah, there were a lot of triggers. After meals, the thing to do was to have a cigarette first thing in the morning, even before getting, dressed to go to work, having a cigarette. And I think also the fact that I work at a health center, I didn't want to embarrass myself, so to speak, with working at a health center, encouraging other people to be healthy, and then I'm standing outside smoking a cigarette. So that's not the image that I wanted to present. So I wanted to walk it like I talked it. So that was the other piece for me. Working in a health center really, really helped me get it together.
All right. Any additional questions?
I'll probably be getting them throughout the day, so I'll have
Okay.
to submit them to Dr. Jensen later and hit LaWanda up on email.
Very good.
Yeah.
Before we close, Dr. Nolan, could you give us any indication of what the average number of quit attempts is for someone who is trying to quit smoking before they're successful?
It's about 5 to 7. So, and a quit attempt is judged by 24-hour period with the intention of trying to quit. It's about 5 to 7, which just reinforces that notion that if you're not successful, keep trying. I wouldn't say it gets easier with time, but with support
And experience.
and experience, I think it goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like we have an additional question.
Nick has a question about quitting. Nick wants to know if it's better to quit cold turkey or if you should do it gradually, and is it dangerous to quit smoking cold turkey?
I'm gonna let you take that, Tricia.
I would not advise quitting cold turkey. I would get support with some resources and some medication in order to be most successful in quitting.
Let me add to that. So the research shows that, of the 7 FDA-approved medications, there's varenicline and bupropion, which are non-nicotine pills. There's a ramp-up period for those. So there's about a 7-day period. It can be extended where you're taking the medication, getting the medication on board before you try to make a quit attempt. There's also some good data with the nicotine replacement therapy, so patch, gum, lozenge, also using those for a period of time, a week, maybe 2, before you attempt to quit.
But that while you're using that ramp-up period to set yourself up for success by getting your mind right, as LaWanda mentioned, getting your support system in place, setting your quit date, and getting some of those cues and those triggers minimalized as best you can. So removing some of the ashtrays, cleaning out your car, whatever those things need to be so that when you do hit that date, that you're able to quit with the most success.
And I think it's important for people to view, quote, failed quit attempts as learning opportunities.
Definitely.
You help figure out what kind of drew you back in there, and working with professionals like yourself it is a great way to increase your chances for success, and ultimately that's what we all want. So I want to thank Dr. Nolan and Tricia and LaWanda so much for being part of today's episode of Bench to Bedside. There is no more important cancer issue than quitting smoking, I can tell you that. So to learn more about the University of Kansas Cancer Center's outreach and engagement efforts, visit kucancercenter.org/community. That's it for today. Join us next week at 10 a.m. for Bench to Bedside. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our Bench to Bedside podcast, now everywhere podcasts are available. Subscribe to our Bench